Okay. Right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillahi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Last week, we talked about in the life of Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anh, how he used to select the governors or the wala or the wali of different provinces or regions or wilayat, whichever terminology that we are familiar with. And wali is considered, if you want to translate into English, it can be said as governor, the one who is governing the specific region. And in Islamic terminology, we use the word wali. When we talked about the selection, there are different points that we talked about in the selection of the walis, that Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anh was very keen about making sure that the person who is selected as a wali or the governor, he is knowledgeable about the task that he has under his hand. And he is knowledgeable in Islam as well, because he was trusted with a task of governing the people of a region according to commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he has to have the knowledge of the things that he is involved with. He has to have a capability. He must be trustworthy person. And he used to assign the people who were good at their task for a specific region. So if the region was made up of a lot of people who were Bedouins, then the person who he appointed was aware of the customs and traditions of the Bedouins. If the area was urbanized, then the people who were made responsible over them were the people who were aware of urban life affairs and stuff like that, the customs and traditions. And the kind of characteristics that he looked into, a person must be compassionate, and he made sure that, and that was specific to himself, that he did not appoint any of his relatives for the task. He did not want to have any kind of a nepotism to come in the way, even though Islamically it is allowed, as long as the person is the one that is capable of the task and he is the right person for the whichever job we're talking about. Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anh, he took it to another extent of making sure that he is not appointing his relatives, and his relatives included for example, Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu anh, one of the great Sahaba of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There are many hadith reported by Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu anh, and his fiqh was famous of Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu anh. Similarly, Sa'id bin Zayd radiallahu anh, another great Sahabi of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who was a cousin of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and not only the cousin, not of Rasulullah, he was a cousin of Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anh. And not only he was a cousin of Umar al-Khattab, but also he was the husband of Umar's sister Fatima radiallahu anhum all jami'an. He was the husband of his sister as well. And he did not appoint him, even though he was also one of those people to whom Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was one of the 10 who was given the glad tidings of Jannah in this dunya. So he made sure that he did not appoint anybody from his family members. And he made sure that if there was more capable person was available, then he removed the one that was appointed as a governor. Not because he had the person who was governing already or was a wali, he has committed something wrong. Rather, he looked for the right person. Umar was very keen about doing the consulting from the Ansar and Muhajirin to make sure the right person is appointed and he has knowledge about the person. If he did not know the person, then he consulted the people who had the knowledge about the person that he was going to appoint as the governor. And then he used to give specific recommendations or suggestions to the people who were appointed for the job. And Umar al-Khattab also looked into personal habits of those people who were appointed as the walis. For example, the zuhud. If a person is a zahid or not. Zahid means he is a pious person. And then he looked into the humility of a person. And not only that, he had the he respected the people who was appointed. He respected the previous governors as well. Unlike nowadays, has become a fashion that every new ruler comes in any place, they have to blame everybody who passed before them. So this is like a norm around the world, and it's not to talk about the West or talk about the East, because they are not ruling by Islam. They're not ruling by the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are ruling by the man-made laws. And one of the ramifications that we see is that people in general, they look for their own benefits when they are making laws, or they're applying the laws over the people, and they're not following the commands of Allah Azza wa Jal. Now today, we'll try to cover, inshallah, the rights and the duties of the Khalifa, and Wali, in the time of the Khulafa Rashidin, and specifically among the Khulafa Rashidin, Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anh. And next week, during the talk about the governors, there was a check and balance in the time of Umar ibn Khattab as well. It was not like somebody is given the power, now he can do whatever he wishes. Rather, yes, there was limited authority was there, but within the commands of Allah Azza wa Jal. So today, inshallah, we'll try to talk about the rights of the governors and the duties, as I said, as much as we are able to cover, and then we'll talk about check and balances, inshallah, next week. Now, when we talk about the rights of the governor, we know that the governors, of course, because they are ruling over a region or a wilaya or a province, whichever term that we are familiar with. And in the time of Khulafa Rashidin, in the time of Umar al-Khattab, the state expanded very fast, because a huge area was under the rule of Islam at that time. Hence, one single ruler by himself would not be able to run the affairs of such a huge land that the Muslims were ruling over. So it was by default he had to, and in Islam also, in the life of Rasulullah and Abu Bakr, we see Rasulullah appointed different walis, and then Abu Bakr when expanded further, then Abu Bakr was expanding as well. And in the Umar time, it expanded way more than the time of Rasulullah and Abu Bakr. Hence, he had many different wala were there, and they had specific power. And when you read the life of Umar ibn Khattab, and even go back to Abu Bakr and Umar, sometimes you see that a wali was assigned a task of leading the salah. Okay, and while the other was appointed to take care of the economic affairs, Baytul Mal, so the collection of the zakah and these things which are related to finance. What does that mean? It has to be clear in our minds. If somebody as a wali appointed to lead the salah does not mean he's the imam of the masjid only. It's not appointed for just to lead the salah. Rather, the hukum of Allah Azza wa Jal was applied uniformly for everything. We're talking about all affairs of life were run by commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you're running a state, you have to rule by some system of life. And in the case of the Khulafa Rashidin, in the time of Rasulullah, we find that they were ruling by Islam, which is from Allah Azza wa Jal, the creator of the heavens and the earth. So when it is referred as somebody who was leading the salah or the wali of the salah, it means that he was taking care of all the affairs except the one who's wali zakah or the finance, who's taking care of the zakah aspect of it, collection and distribution, or taking the zakah money back to the Khalifa, and he will be distributing, whichever way was feasible at that time. But so that's what it means by when you see these terminologies of leading the salah. And you will find that even it goes back to even the time of Khalifa also, even when, for example, when Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, and we'll talk about it in more detail, when he was stabbed and he was on his deathbed, he was a martyr or shaheed, and on his deathbed, when he nominated 6 people, and as I said, the detail will be later on. But until Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anhu was elected as the Khalifa, then the one who was in place of Umar ibn Khattab at that time, he was running the affairs and he was leading the salah. Suhaib. So after Suhaib was done, the Khalifa was appointed, Uthman, and then at that time, Uthman started leading the salah. So leading the salah has different connotation in Islam. It's not, we should not be thinking of leading the salah means only, yes, Today, of course, in the when the state is in place and we are ruling by Islam, then Khalifa appoints and builds masajid. And we'll talk about that today, inshallah. Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, during his time of 10 years, it's been reported he built over 4,000 masajid. 4,000 masajid. Can you imagine that? Today, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give Jazal khair to Brother Abdul Basit. For decades now, he's trying to build this masjid. And it's very tough for him to come up with resources so we can build the masjid here. But when you really have the right things in place in Islam, look how fast these things happen. And kind of personalities those masajid produce also. So we should not look at these stories or the historical events in a subtle way and don't realize what exactly happened. And that's the reality, because when Islam is in place, then it really, you see all these things come into the right place, even building the masajid. You find Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not build a single masjid in the first 13 years of the Mecca era. We all talk about it. When he migrated to Medina, the first masjid was built was Masjid al-Quba, and after that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam went inside the Medina and built Masjid al-Nabawi, and that's the first thing he did. And that's what we see in all those conquests. When Muslims opened the lands, then Umar al-Khattab would assign somebody to build a masjid first. And then the city was expanded around the masjid. And that includes how the streets were built to make sure, as we have discussed in the previous talks, that they used to even make sure how many horse carriages can pass through that specific street that they are building. So big streets or smaller alleys or whatever way they were building, they made sure that was very well calculated even at that time. Unfortunately, nowadays, whenever somebody tries to talk about the Islamic State in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and after Khalifa Rashidin, they try to say, "Oh, you're talking about a very small thing. This small thing was built and Muslims did not do anything." No, today's huge success, even we see, even in the sciences, the basis you will see goes back to the Muslims. Then when the Muslims were ruling, with the rule, that also came along all these scientific progress that they made. But see, these things only come along with when you take the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal in an ideological manner that deals with all affairs of lives. And that gives you success in all arenas, including the science as well. Okay. Anyways, now when we talk about that, the governor's authority and the rights, one of the key things that is very important about when we talk about the governance is, of course, you have to have obedience to the governor. If you don't have obedience, there is no governorship. So you have to have obedience. As Allah Azza wa Jal says in Surah An-Nisa, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ati'u Allah wa ati'u Rasula wa ulil amr minkum. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that, oh, you who believe, obey Allah and His Messenger and ulil amr minkum, the people from among you, the one who have been given the authority. But among you means you're talking about the Muslims among you who have been elected to rule by Islam. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about. So be very clear about this, what it says. And then the other part of the ayah says, فَإِن تَنَازَعْتُمْ فِي شَيْءٍ فَرُدُّوهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. And if you have a tanaza, in Urdu also we use the same word, right? Tanaza. There's a tanaza between two parties, or conflict between two parties. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? If you have a conflict about anything, disagreement about anything, فَرُدُّوهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ, then go back to Allah and His Messenger. Yes, we are commanded to obey the people in authority from the Muslimin, the one who are ruling by Islam. But even if they come up with something that you have disagreement, well, go back to Allah and His Messenger, meaning make sure that what you are conflicting with, you have disagreement with, it has to go back to Allah and His Messenger. Okay? Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala connect this ayah to Iman and Yawm al-Akhirah. Wa in kuntum tu'minuna billahi wal Yawm al-Akhir. If you believe in Allah and the Day of Judgment. And this is a qarina we should always remember. Whenever a hukum of Allah Azza wa Jal is connected to believing in Allah and Yawm al-Akhirah, that's a sign that this hukum is an obligation on us. Obeying Allah and His Messenger is an obligation. We all know that. But people in authority who are ruling by Islam is also an obligation to obey them. Yeah, that's what it means by going back to governor. Governor is appointed by Umar was appointed by the governors. So Umar was one of the legitimate rulers in Islam, radiallahu anhu. So he is appointing a wali, then it's an obedience is a must. So remember, this is an important thing to remember when we talk about wali, what it means by that. Now, and giving advice to the governors was another important thing to have. Always, Umar al-Khattab, you'll find that he is giving the advice. Other thing that you find was, if there is any news which is needed for the governor to rule by the commands of Allah Azza wa Jal, he is to be aware of what's happening around him also. If there's any news which is from other regions of the state, those news have to be conveyed to the governor as well. Now, another key thing that you need, and it's not only governorship, you find in all affairs of our lives as well. If somebody is given a task, he has to have some freedom to take care of that task. If you don't give some support from, like, for example, if you ask your child even to go do something, and then you are the one who is against him to make sure that he fails, he's not gonna be successful. So you have to support him as well. So in the case of governorship also, it's important that he has the support of the Khalifa in the same way. So if he is making decisions, so Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu was very enthusiastic about this principle because he understood the importance of people showing respect to their governors. So their support has to be there and the respect has to be there for the governors as well. Now, governors also, in some cases, whether he can do the ijtihad of his own or he is taking the ijtihad of the scholars around him. When we say ijtihad means issue comes up, there is no definite ruling from the Quran and the Sunnah, then you make come up with the ruling about the issue that comes up from the Quran and Sunnah, the understanding of the Quran and Sunnah, and you apply. Now, keep this in mind that when you talk about the governorship in the time of Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, and if you open up the map and you look at from Medina to Egypt or going to Central Asia, it's long distance we're discussing here. It's not small distance. And the Bilad al-Sham, this is long distance, hundreds, thousands of miles we're discussing here. And there's no type of communications like we have today. There's no communication like you to pick up the phone and talk to somebody or go on a Zoom channel and talk to the people on the internet and this or that. Or there's no airplanes to fly from one place to another place and carry the message. So carrying the message, information from one point to another point can take some time, right? So now, obviously, if there's some issue comes up and Wali has to make a decision, he cannot just wait for some time, days or weeks or months to send information and get back from Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu. So he has to make decisions on the fly also. So he has to have freedom. At the same time, if a new issue comes up and he has to have ijtihad, then he has to have the freedom to do the ijtihad as well. And Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, he made sure that people were making the ijtihad. And one of the Umar's governors in Syria worked out a system of distributing booty among the cavalry and infantry. Umar allowed his ijtihad, for example. And it is well-known fact when Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu was one of Umar's walis. Umar bin Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, another famous Sahabi of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He was a governor in the time of Umar al-Khattab. And it says that he disagreed with Umar in more than 100 matters of ijtihad. I'm not even talking about the information goes there or not. Even he disagreed with Umar al-Khattab. What does it mean by disagreement? It has to be understood though. What it means by that is Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, he had some personal understandings of the issues. Does not mean that he has adopted for the state to be implemented over. Once he has adopted that this is the hukum that has to be applied, everybody has to follow. And in this case, we're talking about is that these are his personal things. And Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, he disagreed and he went along with his opinion. That is allowed. That's ijtihad. It's allowed in those cases. And but remember that again, like we talked about, Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu anhu was one of the fuqaha that many of the schools of thought did link themselves back to. Same way, Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiallahu anhu is another. there were four Abadila, you call them Abadila. They were famous, who used to do the ijtihad. And among them was Abdullah bin Mas'ud and Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu anh, as well. They were the famous ones who had the knowledge of the deen, and Sahaba used to go back to them to get the knowledge from them. Now, he disagreed with Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh because of his knowledge, and also the part of the knowledge was that those places were allowed for him to disagree with. If the disagreement in the cases where the Khalifa of the time has adopted an opinion. Adoption means that he told everybody that everybody must follow that opinion. Okay, but there are places where it's allowed to have differing opinions in Islam. It's not that everybody has to stick with same opinion. As long as you have the evidences from the Quran and Sunnah, both ways, when to follow, when it's allowed not to follow the opinion. Okay, well, moving forward, another thing Umar Khattab's time was that he made sure that the people who were the walis, if he moved them away, like we talked about last week about Shurahbil, radiallahu anh, that he was moved because of not that he was weak or something, rather he found somebody who was more capable than Shurahbil, and he appointed Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas over there. So, and he made sure that it is clear that he was not removing Shurahbil because of any kind of mistake that he has made. Rather, he respectfully moved him because somebody else was more capable than Shurahbil at that time. So that's a key thing to remember. Okay, and then one thing that we hear a lot about the rulers nowadays is stealing the wealth of the ummah nowadays. Those rulers who are over the Muslim lands or even in the non-Muslim lands, one of the things that you see about the rulers are the people they steal, or they make arrangements in a manner that they can usurp the wealth of the people in a legal, illegal manner whatsoever it was. So Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu was very keen about this, that you appoint wali, make sure that his material needs are fulfilled in a manner that he does not have desire to steal this way. Okay, so he was making sure, and that's a stipend that was given to these rulers, because now if their time has been taken away to take care of the people and they are not able to run for example, they cannot do work or they cannot do trade and things like that, hence they have to have some sort of a way of taking care of their family or themselves. So for that, they were given a stipend to run their life affairs. Now, there were Sahaba who did not want to take anything for whatever Umar was offering. And Umar radiallahu anh was keen about giving that. For example, that Abu Ubaidah radiallahu anh said to Umar bin Khattab, you have made the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam indulge in worldly matters, i.e. by using them as governors. So Umar said, oh Abu Ubaidah, if I do not seek the help of the pious people, then who else I'm going to go for? The Sahaba were the people Allah Azza wa Jal talks about them, that radiyallahu anhum, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was pleased with them. They were the one who carried the Islam when nobody was following Islam. They are the one when everybody was against the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the one who were accepting Islam, they stayed with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they gave all sorts of sacrifices. They were the proven ones to whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was pleased with. So they are the pious ones. So Abu Ubaidah radiallahu anhu said, then if you must do that, then make them independent of their, in a way that they are not in need of any worldly things anymore. So you take care of them. So then Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh, he made sure that he has given enough to these people who are appointed in these positions. And there are books that talks about the whole issue of how much were given to which ones. There are many chapters about the subject. I'm not going into that detail. But one thing that Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh, he used to say that about these, whoever was assigned this position, he would say that as far as this wealth is concerned, I regard you and myself as being like one who is entrusted with the wealth of an orphan. meaning Baytul Mal, you are assigned to take care of that, to distribute the wealth. Think of this as you are caretaker of it, like a person who's a guardian over an orphan. Orphan, when we say orphan, a yatim, what does it mean by yatim? Yatim is not a 50-year-old guy, his father passed away. You don't call him a yatim. Yatim means a person or child who has not hit the puberty and his father dies. At that time, that child is considered as yatim, meaning he has no support system behind him. So he needs help. This is what it means by so you are the caretaker of his wealth. He does not even know how to organize the financial affairs even. His father might have left wealth behind him, but he doesn't know how to take care of it. So in Islam, you assign a wali over him, caretaker, guardian. Now, Umar al-Khattab said, you guys who are assigned for this job, you are guardians of the wealth of the ummah, like a wali is guardian over a yatim. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَنْ كَانَ غَنِيًّا فَلْيَسْتَعْفِفْ وَمَنْ كَانَ فَقِيرًا فَلْيَأْكُلْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. Subhanallah. He said, and talking about the guardian, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying, a guardian who's over the yatim's wealth. Then if he is rich, then stay away from the wealth of the poor, of the yatim. But if you're not, if you are the poor one who's a caretaker, because now you are putting your effort to take care of the child. Else you are doing something else. Now you are caretaker of the wealth and the child. So now you are allowed to take, which is bil ma'ruf, which is allowed, respectable in Islam, about the regular people, how much a person would take. So we take that which is ma'ruf, which is allowed and just and reasonable. Okay. So same thing. When a wali is appointed, he is the caretaker of the wealth of a yatim in that context. Hence, he will take only which is ma'ruf, not unjustly. Unlike today's rulers, what we find, whosoever comes in power, he thinks of it, time to get rich, time to fill your pockets, time to fill your accounts in Swiss accounts or accounts in UK or US or Cayman Island or this island or that island, or hide the wealth in a way nobody would know where the wealth is coming from. And some of them, what they do is they assign that the names of the children so that people would not see that, oh, wealth went into his account. So it went into his family members or relatives or friends' accounts. So people would not be able to blame them. Look at how Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu was. As we talked about last week, he was making sure that what was the status of the person before he was selected and after he was taken over. Okay, if there was any growth, extra growth happened, which is unnatural growth happened in their wealth, then he questioned them and put it back into the Baytul Mal. And we are talking about those are the Sahaba Ridwanullah alayhim. He was dealing with. So he was so careful, and that's because of the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It all goes back to, do we have this idea in our mind ingrained that is we have to be conscious of Allah Azza wa Jal. We have to answer Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala whatsoever what we are doing. We have to get out of this mode of that we have to think of how successful I can be, or my friends or my family members can be when I get authority. The thing is, the more authority you have, more power you have, more wealth we have, more health we have, whatsoever we have, more Allah has given to us, because everything is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are more accountable for those things. That's the way we should look at it. And that's the way Sahaba Ridwanullah alayhim, they used to look at these affairs that were assigned to them. Okay. Okay, moving forward. Another thing that he made sure was the governors who were given this task. He made sure that it was they were well taken care of, not only wealth-wise, also if they get sick, because they are human beings, they can get sick as well. As one of the stories talks about in the time of Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, that Mu'aqib, who was Umar's keeper of the Baytul Mal. See, when we say keepers of the Baytul Mal, remember I talked about there are two different kinds of walis that we think of. The one who takes care of the financial things and the one who takes care of the salah. Salah is all general rulings in Islam, and then Baytul Mal is the financial issues. So he fell sick. So Umar asked for a remedy, and he could not find anyone. He was looking for medical knowledge. And finally, he found two men who came from Yemen. And he asked, do you have any remedy that you can offer this righteous man, for his pain is getting worse and worse? Those two men said, we cannot stop this pain, but we have the remedy in a manner that it can reduce, it will not get worse anymore. Whatever pain he is in is not going to get worse. So they asked for some fruit that existed there or not. They brought the fruit, and then they did some sort of medicinal process that reduced the pain, or stopped the pain to get worse and worse for Mu'ayqi. And it is mentioned that until he died, his pain never got worse after that. So subhanAllah, but the point here is Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anh was providing, to this time we call them health insurance. It's not a health insurance like the way today is, which is a ridiculous amount of money have been taken from the people. And if you get sick, later on, you are going to get more and more you have to pay to the insurance company. At the end of the day, you are the one who pay. It's not like they have a charity business that they are just giving charity to the people. It's more of your money. They take it, they run their businesses, they run all those employees that they hired and all those things. And on top of it, then they continue to ask more money from you if you happen to be sick. Sometimes people, they don't realize that when they are working for a company or something. But if you have, there's a term they use, right? Pre-existing conditions. If you are trying to buy insurance of your own money and pre-existing conditions are there, or chronic condition, they call it. If I think it's a chronic condition, if you have that condition for a year or 2 years, it's considered chronic. In that case, your premium goes up. And it can go higher and higher and higher, to the point the brothers and the sisters, they are very well, they must be very well aware of. The ones who do not have the means for getting the insurance and they happen to lose the job and in their old ages, this is one of the biggest problem they face, that they cannot take care of themselves because of the insurance issues. So look, Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anh, it's not only him that the walis were taken care of. This thing was for all the Muslimin as well. So I was thinking about going to the duties as well, but I think it's already past half hour, and I'd rather talk about the duties next week then. It's good to discuss the points about the rights of the governors that we talked about today. If we can just talk about that, if there's any questions or comments about that subject, I would rather to talk about that than open another new subject and then go for another half hour, and we may not be able to complete it in time. We'll stop here, inshallah, and if we'll try to cover, inshallah, the duties and